The wedding invitation arrived on a Wednesday in March. Cream-colored cardstock with elegant gold lettering that made my hands shake as I read it. Mr. and Mrs. Kenneth Hartwell request the pleasure of your company. I had to sit down on my kitchen floor, still holding the mail, because Kenneth was my ex-husband and someone had clearly made a mistake sending this to me. Except it wasn't a mistake. My daughter Megan's handwriting was on the envelope. I'm Athena Bishop, and I destroyed my children's relationship with their father with words I can never take back. It took me 12 years to understand the magnitude of what I'd done, and by then, it was too late for forgiveness. The story starts in 2009, when Kenneth and I were drowning in the aftermath of our divorce. We'd been married for 14 years, and the end came not with dramatic fights or infidelity, but with the slow erosion of two people who'd simply grown apart. I was 38, he was 41, and we had 3 kids caught in the middle. Megan, who was 13 and already showing signs of the fierce independence that would later serve her well. Tyler, 11 and sensitive in ways that made my heart ache. And little Zoe, who was 8 and still believed her parents might magically fix everything. The divorce itself was fairly amicable, all things considered. We agreed on joint custody, split our assets without too much drama, and promised to put the kids first. Kenneth moved into a 2-bedroom apartment across town, and I kept the house because uprooting the children seemed cruel on top of everything else. For the first few months, things went according to plan. Kenneth picked up the kids every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. He helped with homework over the phone, attended their school events, and made sure to call each of them individually before bedtime when they were with me. I thought we were handling things maturely, but divorce has a way of revealing who you really are when the pressure builds, and I wasn't prepared for the person I became. Money was tight. Kenneth paid child support, but it wasn't enough to cover the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and everything else that came with raising 3 kids alone. I'd been working part-time before the divorce, but now I needed full-time income. Finding childcare that worked with my schedule became a constant source of stress. Kenneth had his own struggles. His apartment was cramped, and he was clearly still adjusting to single life. Sometimes he'd cancel last minute because of work obligations, or he'd bring the kids back early because he didn't know how to handle Tyler's meltdowns, or Zoe's constant questions about why mommy and daddy couldn't live together anymore. I started keeping a mental tally of every disappointment, every time he let them down. When Megan's soccer game ran late, and Kenneth couldn't stay because he had dinner plans, I filed it away as evidence. When Tyler came home upset because Daddy's apartment didn't have the right art supplies for his school project, I noted it. When Zoe cried because Kenneth forgot to pack her favorite stuffed animal for the trip back to my house, I added it to my growing list of his failures. In November 2010, Megan had been selected for the lead role in her middle school's production of Our Town. She'd been rehearsing for weeks, and we'd all been looking forward to the performance. Kenneth was supposed to attend, but that morning he called to say he'd come down with the flu. "I'm really sorry, Athena," he said, his voice hoarse. "I can barely get out of bed. I don't want to risk getting the kids sick." I should have been understanding. I should have recognized that he was genuinely ill and disappointed to miss his daughter's big moment. Instead, I saw it as the final straw. "Of course you're sick," my voice sharp with months of accumulated resentment. "You're always sick or busy or something when they really need you." "That's not fair," Kenneth protested weakly. "I haven't missed any of their important events." "Haven't you?" I shot back. "What about Tyler's science fair? What about Zoe's birthday party last month when you showed up an hour late?" The science fair had been rescheduled due to a snow day, and Kenneth had mixed up the dates. The birthday party delay had been because of a flat tire, but in my anger, these explanations felt like excuses. After I hung up, I found all 3 kids sitting in the living room, dressed up and ready to go to the school. They'd overheard enough of the conversation to know their father wasn't coming. "Where's Daddy?" Zoe asked, her lower lip trembling. And that's when I said it. The 7 words that would haunt me for years to come. "He doesn't want to be here anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. Megan's face went white, Tyler's eyes filled with tears. Zoe looked confused, like she was trying to process information that didn't make sense. "What do you mean?" Megan asked quietly. I should have stopped there. I should have taken it back, explained that Daddy was sick and would be at the next performance. Instead, I doubled down. "I mean, he's chosen not to be part of our lives anymore. He has his own life now, and we're not really part of it." It was a lie born of hurt and exhaustion, but it felt true in that moment. Kenneth's absences, his struggles to adapt to shared custody, his obvious discomfort with the new dynamics. I'd twisted it all into evidence that he didn't want his children. The kids' relationship with their father changed almost immediately. When Kenneth called that evening to check on Megan's performance, she was distant and monosyllabic. Tyler refused to come to the phone altogether. Zoe asked him directly why he didn't want to be with them anymore, and I could hear the confusion in Kenneth's voice through the receiver. "What are you talking about, sweetheart? Of course I want to be with you." But the damage was done. I'd planted a seed of doubt that grew every time Kenneth had to reschedule a visit. Every time he seemed overwhelmed by single parenthood. Every time he made a decision that put his own needs first. The kids started interpreting his every action through the lens of my bitter proclamation. Kenneth tried to address it directly with me. "Athena, the kids seem to think I don't want to spend time with them. Did you say something?" I denied it, of course. I told him they were just adjusting to the divorce, that it was normal for children to feel abandoned during custody transitions. I convinced myself that I was protecting them from the truth, that their father was an unreliable disappointment who couldn't be counted on when it mattered. Over the following months, the visitation schedule became increasingly difficult to maintain. The kids would cry when it was time to go to Kenneth's apartment. They'd call me constantly while they were there, begging to come home early. Kenneth, not understanding why his children suddenly seemed to resent him, became defensive and frustrated. "They act like I'm some kind of stranger," he told me during one of our increasingly tense conversations. "Tyler won't even talk to me anymore." I offered superficial sympathy while privately feeling vindicated. "See," I thought, "he can't handle being a real father to them." By 2012, Kenneth's visits had dwindled to sporadic phone calls and birthday cards. The kids had stopped asking about him. When Megan started high school, she didn't even tell him about her achievements. Tyler developed anxiety issues that required counseling, and Zoe became clingy and fearful of being left alone. I told myself I was protecting them from further disappointment. I was the stable parent, the one who showed up consistently, the one who put their needs first. Kenneth had proven he couldn't handle the responsibility of fatherhood, and it was better for everyone if he just stayed away. But children grow up, and eventually they start asking harder questions. It was Megan who first began to suspect something wasn't right. She was 17, getting ready for college, and her guidance counselor had suggested she might be eligible for additional financial aid if she could provide information about her father's income. "I don't even know where he works now," she told me. "Should I try to contact him?" I discouraged it, suggesting we could manage the college expenses without his help. But Megan was persistent, and she eventually tracked down Kenneth's phone number through mutual friends. Their first conversation in years was awkward but not hostile. Kenneth was working as a project manager for a construction company, had moved to a larger apartment, and seemed genuinely interested in Megan's college plans. He asked about Tyler and Zoe, sent his love, and expressed regret about the distance that had grown between them. "He didn't sound like someone who doesn't want us in his life," Megan told me afterward, her voice thoughtful. "He sounded sad." I deflected, reminding her of all the times Kenneth had let them down when they were younger. But doubt had taken root in my daughter's mind, and she started asking more questions. Why did he stop calling us? Did he ever ask to see us more often? Do you think he knows Tyler's been having problems at school? I answered these questions with half-truths and redirections, but I could see Megan pulling away from me. She started calling Kenneth regularly, rebuilding their relationship despite my subtle attempts to discourage it. The full truth came out in the spring of 2018, when Zoe was 16 and going through her own rebellious phase. She'd been pushing boundaries, staying out late, and generally acting like a teenager who'd been carrying too much emotional weight for too long. During one of our fights, she screamed at me, "At least Dad never pretended to be perfect like you do." "Your father chose to leave us," I shot back. "He chose not to be part of this family." "That's not true," Zoe yelled. Megan told me what really happened. She talked to Dad about it. "He wanted to see us all the time, but you made us believe he didn't want us. You lied to us." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. I tried to deny it, to explain that I'd been trying to protect them, but Zoe was already running upstairs to her room. Later that evening, Megan confronted me directly. "Mom, I need you to tell me the truth. When we were kids, after the divorce, did you tell us that Dad didn't want to be with us anymore?" I sat in my living room, looking at my eldest daughter's face, so much like Kenneth's, with the same determined expression he used to get when he was trying to work through a problem. I could have continued lying. I could have found a way to justify my actions or shift the blame. Instead, I told her the truth. "Yes," I said quietly. "I said that. I was angry and hurt, and I wanted him to hurt too. I thought I was protecting you from being disappointed by him." Megan's face crumpled. "Mom, how could you do that to us? How could you do that to him?" The conversation that followed was the most difficult of my life. Megan detailed the years of therapy Tyler had needed, the abandonment issues Zoe still struggled with, the way all three of them had grown up believing their father didn't love them enough to fight for them. "He did try to fight for us," Megan said through tears. "He called constantly that first year. He sent letters. He even went to court to try to get more custody time. But we were so cold to him, so convinced he didn't really want us, that eventually he gave up." I learned that Kenneth had kept every school picture, every report card, every piece of their lives that he could gather from a distance. He'd created college funds for all three of them, never knowing if they'd ever speak to him again. He'd remarried in 2015, but hadn't invited the kids to the wedding because he thought they wouldn't want to come. "His wife seems really nice," Megan said. "She has 2 kids from her first marriage, and Dad talks about us all the time. She's been encouraging him to reach out again." The wedding invitation I'd received was for Kenneth's stepdaughter, not Kenneth himself. My daughter had sent it to me because she thought I should know that she and her siblings were rebuilding their relationship with their father, and that they were all attending the wedding as a family. "We're not inviting you," Megan said, her voice steady but cold. "We can't trust you anymore, Mom. You stole our father from us, and you stole us from him. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that." Tyler, now 21 and struggling with depression, was even more direct when he finally called me. "I've spent my whole life thinking I wasn't good enough for my own father to love me," he said. "Do you have any idea what that does to a person? I've been in therapy for years because of the abandonment issues you caused." Zoe, at 18, was the most heartbreaking of all. She'd always been my baby, my little girl who'd climbed into my bed during thunderstorms and made me picture frames out of popsicle sticks. Now she looked at me with the same wariness she'd once reserved for strangers. "I don't understand why you would hurt us like that," she said. "I don't understand why you would hurt Dad like that. He's a good person, Mom. He's always been a good person." In the 2 years since that conversation, I've had to face the reality of what I did. I didn't just lie to my children. I robbed them of a relationship with their father during some of the most important years of their lives. I robbed Kenneth of watching his children grow up, of being there for their milestones, of being the father he'd wanted to be. My relationship with all 3 of my children is strained now. They speak to me out of obligation, but the easy affection we once shared is gone. They've formed a new family unit with Kenneth and his wife, and I'm the outsider now, the one who gets polite phone calls on holidays and stilted conversations about the weather. Kenneth has never asked for an apology, though I've tried to give him one. The few times we've spoken, he's been civil but distant. He's rebuilt his life, and I'm not part of it. His wife seems genuinely kind, and from what I can see through social media posts my children share, she's been a wonderful stepmother to them. The hardest part is watching my children thrive in ways they never did when I was their primary parent. Tyler's anxiety has improved significantly since reconnecting with Kenneth. Zoe is more confident and secure. Megan graduated college summa cum laude and is planning her own wedding now, with Kenneth walking her down the aisle. I thought I was protecting my children from disappointment, but I was actually protecting myself from having to share them. I thought I was the better parent, but I was actually the more selfish one. I thought I was keeping them safe from hurt, but I was inflicting a wound that would take years to heal. The truth is, Kenneth was never a perfect father, but he was a loving one. He was learning how to navigate divorce and single parenthood just like I was. But instead of giving him the grace to figure it out, I decided he was failing and convinced our children he didn't care enough to try. I live alone now in the same house where I raised my kids, surrounded by memories of the family I destroyed through my own bitterness and pride. The silence is different from the chaotic noise of children growing up. It's the silence of consequences, of choices that can't be undone. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd handled that November evening differently, if I'd explained that Daddy was sick and disappointed to miss Megan's performance, if I'd encouraged the kids to call him, to send him pictures, to tell him about their day, if I'd swallowed my pride and acknowledged that divorce is hard on everyone, including the parent who doesn't get to tuck their children in every night. But I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I chose revenge over my children's well-being. And I've spent the last decade living with the consequences. The months that followed the wedding invitation brought a series of small revelations that cut deeper than any dramatic confrontation ever could. I discovered, through fragments of conversations and social media posts I wasn't supposed to see, that Kenneth had been quietly present in ways I'd never imagined. He'd been sending care packages to Tyler during his worst depressive episodes, filled with art supplies and books he thought might help. He'd been contributing to a savings account for Zoe's college fund, adding money every month for years without telling anyone. When Megan had her wisdom teeth removed last year, Kenneth had taken time off work to drive her to the oral surgeon because I'd been scheduled for a double shift at the dental office. These discoveries arrived like delayed punishment, each one a reminder of the father I'd convinced myself didn't exist. I'd been so focused on cataloging Kenneth's failures that I'd missed all the ways he'd been trying to stay connected to our children, even when I'd made it nearly impossible for him to do so. The care packages had been sent to Tyler's friend's address because Tyler had been afraid to tell me about them. The college fund had been managed through a third party because Kenneth knew I'd discouraged Zoe from accepting his help. The wisdom teeth incident had been kept secret because Megan knew I'd interpret Kenneth's kindness as an attempt to undermine my authority. I realized that for years, my children had been living double lives, accepting their father's love in secret, while maintaining the fiction I'd created, that he was absent by choice. They'd been protecting me from the truth of his continued devotion, just as I'd thought I was protecting them from the truth of his supposed abandonment. The irony was devastating. We'd all been lying to each other in the name of love, and those lies had created more pain than any honest conversation ever could have. My isolation became more complete when I learned that Kenneth and his wife, Sarah, had bought a house with enough bedrooms for all the children, including their own 2 kids and my 3. The house had become a gathering place for holidays and weekends, a place where my children could experience the kind of blended family harmony I'd spent years trying to prevent. Through the few details Megan shared during our stilted phone calls, I learned that Sarah had been instrumental in helping my children heal from the abandonment trauma I'd caused. She'd encouraged them to express their anger about the lost years with their father, and she'd helped Kenneth understand how to rebuild trust with teenagers who'd been taught not to believe in his love. The Christmas of 2022 was the first time in their lives that my children didn't spend the holiday with me. They'd gone to Kenneth's house instead, and I spent December 25th alone in a house that still held their childhood decorations and photo albums, filled with pictures of a family that no longer existed in the same way. I found myself studying those old photos, looking for signs of the bitterness and resentment that had been growing in me even then. In one picture from 2009, just months after the divorce, I could see the tightness around my eyes, the way I held Zoe just a little too possessively, the forced smile that didn't reach my face. I'd been so focused on Kenneth's supposed failures that I'd missed the evidence of my own deteriorating emotional state. The realization that I'd been an unreliable narrator of my own life was perhaps the most unsettling discovery of all. I'd spent years crafting a story where I was the devoted single mother, heroically protecting my children from their negligent father, never acknowledging that my version of events might be skewed by my own pain and prejudice. Looking back at those early post-divorce years, I could see Kenneth's struggles with single parenthood, not as evidence of his lack of love, but as proof of how much he did love them. He was overwhelmed because he cared so much about getting it right, not because he wanted to escape his responsibilities. The most painful moment came when I found a box of letters in my attic, letters that Kenneth had written to the children during those first difficult years, but had never sent. They were filled with expressions of love, confusion about their coldness toward him, and detailed accounts of his daily life that he'd hoped to share with them. One letter to Tyler, dated just months after my devastating lie, contained a passage that I read over and over until I'd memorized it. I know you're angry with me, and I don't understand why, but I want you to know that I think about you every day. I drive by your school sometimes just to feel closer to you. I know that probably sounds crazy, but I miss you so much it feels like part of me is missing too. These letters, found too late to matter, revealed the depth of Kenneth's grief during those lost years. He'd been processing his own abandonment, not by his children, but by his children's inexplicable rejection of him. He'd been trying to understand what he'd done wrong, never knowing that their coldness was based on my lie rather than his actions. The letters showed a man desperate to maintain connection with his children, sending care packages and cards and messages that were received with suspicion rather than joy. Because I'd poisoned the well of their trust, I kept those letters in my bedside table now, a nightly reminder of the love I'd almost succeeded in destroying. They served as evidence that Kenneth had never stopped being a father, even when I'd made it nearly impossible for him to act like one. They proved that the narrative I'd built about his selfishness, his inability to handle real parenthood, his ultimate abandonment of his responsibilities, had been a fiction created by my own wounded heart and desperate need to win a competition that should never have existed.